All right, well, Casey here with CL Creative, where I'm teaching you web design and Webflow one video at a time. And today we're going to build a random quote generator in two different ways. First, on page load, and then second, whenever you scroll into view. We're going to use some JavaScript, a little CSS, as well as Webflow's CMS and GSAP for the scroll trigger animation. Let's jump into the computer, check things out. All right, well, here we are in the computer. So let me show you how I have this laid out. I have two different sections built. I have a quote header, and I just separate it with just some random content so that we can get the scroll. And then I have another section for the quote scroll. Both of those are set up pretty much the same. So let me just roll into here. I've got my padding global, container large, section site wide, and then I have my quote wrapper. And then inside of that, I have a collection list. And so in this collection list, we've got our quote list or quote item, and this is where we're really doing most of the work here. And then just to have some spacing and separation here, inside of my quote item, I have my quote mark and I have my quote text. This is, flex, as well as my quote item is flex. So that way I'm separating everything out. So if I jump over to the CMS, it's a super simple setup. All I have is the person's name and then the quote. That's it. And then you can put as many quotes as you would like here. I've just put 5 quotes in for our purposes so that we will be able to see that. Now, most of the magic is going to happen inside of the code. So let's jump into our code here and check things out. Now, for our purposes, I have this code inside of Webflow. And one of the things that I've done is I've set the style on the quote item. I've set it to display none, opacity 0, with a transition of 1 second. And this is for the header. And then here I have my quote item GSAP, which is going to be down for the GSAP animation, display none, opacity of 0. These are going to be the starting points for both of them. The reason that I set the styles here in the custom code section in Webflow is so that I can actually see them on the page. Webflow will apply these styles whenever the site is published, but when it's not published, you're going to be able to see them and be able to see what's happening. If not, we would just have a blank area here. Then I've also added in my GSAP library as well as ScrollTrigger. And then down here in the body tag section, one of the things that I've done first is whenever we load this content on here, we're going to register our GSAP scroll trigger, and we'll get back to that in just a moment. But what we're doing here is we're just query selecting all of the quote items. So these are the individual quote items that you see here. We're getting all of those items, and then what we're doing is we are selecting one of those items at random. And we're using math.random to do that. And we're taking this query selector all, which is going to create a node list for us, and we are getting the length of that. And so we're doing math.random times length, and then we're using math.floor to make this a whole number. Then what we're doing is we're just setting this random quote to quotes and this random quote index. So that way what we're actually doing is we're taking this node list, we're taking our random quote index, which we're getting from math.random, and we are selecting just one of those quotes in that node list, or you could think of it as an array, though it's not an array, it's a node list. All right, so what we're doing first for the header is we are just taking this random quote and we are changing the style to flex. And then we are just going to wait 10 milliseconds here, and we're just going to fade in or we're going to change the random quote.style opacity to 1. And then what we've set up here is a transition with an opacity of 1 second with just a general ease. And so this is going to make this right here fade in very nicely. So if we look at that, you would see that, right? And then every time you reload the page, there's going to be a different quote that shows up. Now, sometimes it might show the same one simply because we're using math.random, and it's just selecting a random number for us. But for the most part, you're going to get a separate quote. So say you had a page that's going to load and you wanted this to display. Well, this is one way to get that done in the header. The next thing that we have done, and that pretty much just sums up what we're going to do for the header. The next option is to put this inside of a section, and in that section, whenever you scroll into view, it's going to display a random quote for us. And this is where we're going to use our GSAP animation platform in order to do that. And so what we're done is basically the same thing. We're just going to query selector all of the items. We're going to use math.floor again, and we're going to use or we're going to set the quote GSAP. So this item here, we're going to get the index of that by using this math.random. So it's going to pull back another random quote for us. And what's going to happen is we're actually going to set this to a display of flex so that whenever it's ready to fade in, it's there for us, and it's just going to select this one item that we're getting right here from our selected quote GSAP. Then whenever we scroll into view, what's going to happen, we're using this to tween, and we're going to fade in with an opacity of 1, and we're going to fade in over 1 second with an ease of power 1 in. And then we have our scroll trigger set up. Our trigger is going to be on our selected quote, and we're going to start at the top 80% and the bottom 70%, and we're just going to play this once. And so whenever we do that, what's actually going to happen is as we scroll down and we scroll in to view, we get our quote. So this way, whenever someone is scrolling through your website, your quote is going to show up, and it's going to be a random quote. So if we go back up here, so we're out of the trigger range, we scroll back into view, we see we get another quote here. And then again, if we do that again, we're going to get another quote, which now in the next video that I make, we're actually going to reach out to a free API, and we're going to pull in a number of different quotes. We're still going to randomize which quote is generated, but instead of having to fill up a CMS by ourselves, we are going to use an API in order to pull this in for us, and we'll have much more than just 5 quotes to pull from. We could have hundreds of quotes to pull from. So keep an eye out for that video. If you found this video helpful, then like. If you want more videos like this, then please subscribe. I will also put down in the comments a link to a blog post where I will put all of the code for this so that you could just simply copy and paste that into your own project, and then you will have this automatic quote generator powered by Webflow's CMS. Hope to see you on the next video.